2, 3, 4. Hello, what about you, and welcome to another whiskey review with me, the Whiskey Novice. It's good to be back with you once more. Thank you for joining me. And it's start of another new series. This time one I've taken to calling Baby I Got the Blends. Just a little nod to that old number by Radiohead there, which I couldn't quite get to in the intro. There were those who knew what I was talking about. Yes, it's been, I couldn't believe 85. I'm 85 reviews in, and I've never in that time really looked at what I'm going to call accessible blends, sort of off-the-shelf blends. I'm saying accessible. Obviously, depending on where you're at in the world, depends on how accessible these are. But most of them are fairly accessible here in the UK. And also, when I say accessible, I mean they're inexpensive, generally. Most of the bottles that I'm looking at in this series all came under £25. Most of, I think there might have been one that went over the £25 mark. So they're all fairly affordable, fairly accessible, I think. And I'm going to start with this one, Naked Grouse. And a little naked bottle that it is. Just the grouse embossed on the front of it there. Bottled at 40%. Give you a bit of a background on it. Owned by the Edrington Group. This one was launched in 2011 as a blended Scotch. Now, there's a difference between if you're new to whiskey, there's a difference between, you'll hear blended Scotch, you'll also hear blended malt. There's a difference. And if you're wondering what that difference is, I've actually put, rather than going into it here, I've put a little guide down in the description below which will explain all of them, malt, grain, blends. And it's easier that than me breaking it down every episode as to what it is. This, as I say, was released in 2011 as a blended Scotch, but later it's now almost a standalone brand. They've created a standalone brand as in it's no longer part of the Naked Grouse, or sorry, the famous Grouse portfolio. So this then, as I say, became a blended malt, sort of branched out and did a little thing on its own. As of 2017, I went back a bit in my research, couldn't find an awful lot on it, but as of 2017, this was a blend of malts, all owned by the Edrington Group, obviously, from Highland Park, Macallan, and Glenturret then. But I'm not sure. Now, obviously there was others, and I'm not even sure if Glenturret's still in there, for the simple fact that I think Glenturret changed hands and is no longer owned by Edrington. Could be wrong. And it's matured in first fill and refill American and European oak before being finished in Oloroso first fill Oloroso sherry butts for 6 months. So there you go. There's your full history. It's a blended malt. It's obviously going to have all your chill filtration, all your colour added, etc. But let's get into what it's like in itself, shall we? Bottled at 40%, it kicks off with a nice, rich, sherried whiskey note. 6 months in those sherry butts, but there's good stuff going on, good sherry stuff going on. It's a little thin on the nose, but there's character present. I've had an awful lot worse at 40%. Slight hint of cherries, hint of stewed apples. It's actually, yes, it's thin on the nose, but it's a decent nose. I did say that it had character, and it does have character for a cheap blend. You can pick this up. Usually, it seems to be one of those that spends an awful lot of its time on offer. It's usually around the £20 mark here in the UK, which you'll see as I go along, I think is actually a very good price for it. It's not spirity. You can break this down to its individual parts almost, because it has the sherry influence, but it also has all of that first fill and refill American European oak influence. There are the hints of nail varnish. It's fresh orange. Even a good hardwood sawdust like mahogany. It always surprises me, this whiskey, because I did say it is technically a cheap blend, but it doesn't perform like a cheap blend. It just noses like a decent, easy sipping sherried malt. Slight peppermint note after everything else has went on there. So yeah, good start, good nose. Quite rich. Quite rich. Sweet and sour delivery. It's a bit thin on the palate yet again. I want to try and keep this in terms of price and accessibility. So slightly thin is to be expected. It's actually a little detached even. I said you could break it down into its individual parts. And sometimes in the palate it feels like those individual parts aren't marrying. It's a little disparate. Still, the sherry notes do carry through. And that vanilla, that toffee, that would come and be expected from the American oak, is also there in the palate. This reminds me of an old whiskey. I'm going to say an old whiskey. I mean, when I remember my father going to the bar as a teenager in my late teens with my father, obviously remembering that we're allowed to drink alcohol here in the UK from the age of 18, going to the bar with my father, and my father would always have had a dram. Now, my father would always have had, I've said it before, he was a famous grouse man. But I just have this memory of smelling it. I wasn't a big fan of whiskey in those days. But, certainly Scotch whiskey. I didn't mind a bourbon every now and again, but just I wouldn't have been a massive fan of it. But I just remember it smelling like this. So it reminds me of, I'm going to say old-fashioned. I don't mean the cocktail old-fashioned. I just mean how I remember whiskey from an earlier part of my life. Slight touch of pipe tobacco. And a nuttiness, Brazil nut. Yeah, Brazil nut. And I'm getting it again, I got it in my tasting notes where I thought chocolate and coffee, but I think actually what it is coffee cake. And actually to take that coffee cake one further, I said Brazil nut, so there may even be walnut, might be a hint of walnut that I'm getting rather than Brazil nut. The thinness, as I say, does pull it back a bit. But in the scheme of things, remember, it's not expensive. Finish. And this is what generally pulls down cheap blends for me. Cheap whiskies, pretty much full stop. As a finish, as a poor finish, a weak finish, a short finish. And yeah, this finish is sort of gone. 40%, not terribly memorable. But when you hang around in this for a while, not even your first, but certainly if you stay with the bottle of it and go back for another dram, the finish, and I remember this from when I was doing my tasting notes, the finish does get better. It's like a lot of them, the memory of it gets better. It starts to get in there, it starts to get ingrained, and this is pretty much the same. It's more-ish, I'll give it that. It's an easy sipper. Easy to drink, quite dangerous at the price. However, I think Edrington have actually priced this fairly well because it sort of keeps it not in that exclusive band of the market by any means. It's affordable, but it's not gut rot cheap either. So it's not sitting right on the bottom shelf getting picked up by the tunnel dwellers, if you know what I mean. So there you go. That's pretty much. I'm not going to add water. Most of the whiskies I'm reviewing in this series are bottled at 40%. As with every review I do, during my tasting notes, I will add water. I know what happens to this. It makes a thin thing thinner and a palate just flat and bland. So it doesn't really bring anything to it. So I ain't going to add water when I know that's what's going to happen in it. Yeah, now I'm getting to that point where, as I mentioned earlier on, that the finish starts to become better, the finish starts to become more memorable. It just takes this to be on the palate for a while. It's not going to knock anybody's socks off. There's not a lot of accessible blends which will, but it's just a good, easy sipper. So there you have it. Let's then yes, if you like this, I'm going to recommend this to you, and it is a single malt from Glenmorangie, the La Santa, the 12-year-old. Now, a little add-on to this one, remembering this is the UK release, bottled at 43%. You Americans, any of you watching out there, get this at 46%. You lucky dogs. So it will pack a punch more so than this one does. So if you really want to know what this is like and haven't had it, thin your La Santa down a bit. Yeah, these pair sort of remind me of each other. So they do. Enough sherry influence to get you going without it being a sherry bomb. Enough going on just to get. So yeah, if you've had Naked Grouse and you liked it, and this is a good time for those maybe beginning their journey who are dwelling around that blend area for a while yet, this would be a good time then to look toward the single malts. Not putting down by any means blended malts or blended Scotch, but just if you want to progress into the single malt area, find what you like about that blend. Find what it is in it that's appealing to you, and then maybe look to the single malt market and see what ticks those boxes. Also, it doesn't hurt to find out, if you can, what malts go into a blended malt or what malts and grains go into a blended Scotch, because there may be something in there which appeals to you. It may be the one element which makes that blend good for your palate. So if you can find what it is, it doesn't do any harm to find out and then maybe track down that malt and or grain. So there you have it. That is the first of this series done and dusted. Once again, the Baby I Got the Blends is what this was going to be, and it's going to be a longer series. I'm going to do this for a couple of months. because I really cannot believe that I've never touched on accessible blends before. And there are some good ones out there, so it was about time I righted that wrong. There you have it. Till the next time, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very, very much to my patrons. If you wish to join that group, the details are below in the description. Till the next time, here's to your good health. Cheers. Hey, thanks for watching my video. Please click and subscribe to be notified of further content.